All right, welcome everyone. Let's dive deep into Irelia, the blade dancer. We've got a ton of stuff to go through. Stories, lore, even some in-world analysis.
Yeah, there's a lot.
What's so cool is how she represents like everything about Ionia. It's not just about how amazing she is at fighting, although, those skills are incredible. But it's how she changes from this elegant dancer to a powerful leader.
Yeah.
So get ready, because we're going to break down how war can completely change, not just people, but an entire culture too.
The most important thing about Irelia is that Ionia is all about balance.
Right?
Not just the mystical stuff, though that's definitely part of it, but in their everyday life too. Harmony, meditation, being connected to nature. These aren't just ideas for them, they're like built into their society.
Yeah.
Which makes the invasion by Noxus so brutal. It's like a total clash of values.
Totally. It's crazy, right? Imagine this peaceful island nation suddenly attacked by these ironclad armies. Talk about a wake-up call. And for Irelia, it gets really personal. In the beginning, she sees dance as just art. Even when her grandma is trying to teach her about the spiritual side of it, she even leaves her family to train in Placidium. That was like the place to be for dancers.
Yeah, Placidium's super important. It's not just about pretty dances. The monasteries there held ancient knowledge. They trained Ionia's spiritual leaders. It was like the heart of their culture.
It's huge.
So when Noxus takes it over, it's not just a strategic move, it's a direct attack on Ionia itself. And for Irelia, who's there, perfecting her art, it's like a total nightmare.
Talk about bad timing. But it's also where we see those hints you mentioned, right? Her dance skills, the discipline, the precision, it all sets the stage for how she'll fight later on.
Wow.
But before we get there, I gotta ask, why was young Irelia so against the whole spiritual thing?
Well, she comes across as really headstrong, independent,
Right.
maybe even a bit skeptical. She loves the beauty of Ionian tradition, but doesn't really get the deeper meaning until it's almost taken from her.
It's heavy.
It's like she needed that contrast, the harshness of Noxus, to truly appreciate what Ionia stood for.
Definitely. And speaking of harsh, the stories don't sugarcoat things. Irelia comes back home to find her village. Well, let's just say occupied isn't strong enough.
Right.
And the Noxians don't just want to be in control, they want to crush the Ionian spirit. That scene where they try to destroy her family crest, it's chilling.
It's symbolic on so many levels.
Yeah.
That crest isn't just a cool design, it represents her family line, her connection to Ionia's history. By attacking it, Noxus is trying to sever those ties, to dominate not just physically, but culturally too.
That's rough.
And you see how that fuels Irelia's rage. It's not just about her family, it's about everything she cares about being violated.
And that brings us to that turning point. When her powers awaken, she's facing certain death, right? And suddenly these broken pieces of the crest, they become weapons, imbued with Ionian magic and her own raw emotions. Now, some people might think it's just a convenient plot device, but was there anything hinting at this power in the lore?
There are definitely hints. Remember her grandma emphasizing the spiritual connection with dance? It's like those teachings were seeds waiting for the trauma of war to water them.
Wow. Okay.
And remember, magic in Ionia is tied to their feelings, to their connection with the land. So with Irelia's grief and anger, it's like a dam bursting. Power comes flooding out, but it's shaped by her will, by her training as a dancer. It's not just any magic, it's her magic.
Chills, man. Chill. So we've got this young woman trained in grace and beauty, suddenly wielding these deadly blades.
It's intense.
And it's not just about revenge, is it? She starts using her dance to preserve Ionian culture, to give people hope under this crushing oppression. Was that a conscious choice or more like a gut reaction?
Probably a bit of both. On one hand, she's clinging to something familiar, something beautiful in this world that's fallen apart.
Makes sense.
But there's also strategy involved. Remember, Ionian society is decentralized. They don't have a standing army like Noxus.
Right.
So by performing, Irelia is reminding people who they are, what they're fighting for.
Yeah.
It's a rallying cry, but subtle, hidden in art.
That's so clever, and it speaks to the bigger idea of cultural resistance, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Even in the darkest times, people find ways to hold on to their identity, to fight back against being controlled.
Absolutely.
Whether it's art, music, stories, those things become even more vital when everything's at stake.
In Irelia's case, that expression turns into something even more powerful.
Right.
But before we get to that, we need to talk about the turning point, the event that really unleashes her as the blade dancer.
Okay.
And it all goes back to Placidium. Placidium, that's where things get really interesting.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's already a tense situation, right? Noxus is holding the sacred place. Ionian forces are coming together trying to free it. But what's crazy is that Jericho Swain, a Noxian general, he's not just some muscle-bound commander. He's a strategist, a schemer. He knows how much Placidium means to Ionia, so he uses that. He takes hostages, Irelia included, and sets a trap for the resistance.
Classic Swain.
Yeah.
Always thinking ahead. He doesn't just want the land, he wants to break Ionia's spirit.
It's heavy.
Imagine what the Ionian leaders are going through. Charge in and risk a bloodbath, or hold back and watch their cultural heart die?
Yeah.
It's a no-win situation designed to make them doubt themselves, to make them lose hope.
Talk about pressure. But this is where we see Irelia's true power emerge. She breaks free from captivity. And it's not just a physical escape, right? It's like she's shedding the limits of her old life, the doubt, the hesitation. It's almost like Ionia itself is finding its will to fight.
There's this amazing image in one of the stories describing Irelia surrounded by Noxian soldiers.
Oh, yeah.
But she's not just swinging a sword, she's dancing with those blades, each piece of her crest moving on its own, weaving this deadly, intricate pattern.
Yeah.
It's both beautiful and terrifying at the same time.
Which makes you wonder, was it all Ionian magic, or was it her years of dance training? You know, that discipline and control suddenly turned into a weapon.
Exactly.
The stories kind of blur the lines there, don't they?
They do.
It's like talent and trauma combined into something incredible.
They do, and that's what makes it so captivating. You can't separate the dancer from the warrior, the personal from the political. It's all connected, just like those blades moving across the battlefield.
Yeah.
And Swain, even with all his scheming, he underestimates that.
Yeah.
He expects anger, predictable fury.
Yeah.
But he gets art. Deadly, breathtaking art.
And it works. He's caught completely off guard. His troops are panicking. There's even that part where Irelia takes him down, cuts off his arm. That's got to be symbolic too, right?
Oh, totally.
Not just a physical blow, but like shattering Noxus's arrogance. Their idea that they can just march in and take what they want.
Yeah, that single act, this young woman standing over a defeated general, it becomes a turning point in the war. The news spreads everywhere, and suddenly Irelia is not just a skilled fighter, she's a symbol. The blade dancer, that's what they call her. The embodiment of Ionia's resistance.
Which brings us to a really interesting question. Because from what I'm seeing, Irelia doesn't exactly jump at the chance to lead.
Right.
She's still hurting, traumatized. Part of her probably just wants that peaceful life back, the one the invasion destroyed.
Yeah.
So what pushes her to take on this role?
Need. For one, Ionia is decentralized. They don't have this tradition of powerful warlords.
Right.
But they need someone to rally behind, someone who embodies their spirit, their defiance.
Yeah.
And Irelia, whether she likes it or not, she fits that role.
Right. It's like that classic reluctant hero story.
Uh-huh.
But with this added layer of cultural importance. She's not just fighting to survive, she's fighting for Ionia's very soul.
Yeah.
But leading a nation through years of brutal war, that's got to be a heavy burden.
Definitely. You can see the inner struggle in the sources.
Yeah.
This constant tension between the dancer and the warrior, wanting peace but needing to fight. And the fact that she finally confronts and defeats Admiral Duqual,
Right.
the man who killed her family. It's like closure for her. But also a reminder that she can't escape her past. It's a part of who she is now.
That's powerful and sad, too.
Yeah.
Because even though they drive Noxus out, victory comes at a price. Ionia is fractured, their way of life is broken. It's like that saying, you can't go home again. Irelia can't just go back to being that carefree artist, can she? The war changed everything.
Exactly. And that's what makes the aftermath so interesting. We've got this external conflict, rebuilding a broken nation, but also this internal struggle. Irelia dealing with the weight of leadership, the scars of war. She's a symbol of hope, sure, but even symbols are human, with doubts and burdens.
Which makes me think about how we often see historical figures,
Yeah.
as these legendary icons.
Yeah.
But Irelia's story reminds us that there's always more to the story. Human cost of conflict, the weight of responsibility.
It's true.
And it makes her victory even more meaningful because it wasn't just about defeating an enemy, it was about facing those inner demons, too.
And that journey isn't over. The war may be won, but the peace is fragile. Ionia is facing internal divisions, political maneuvering. It's like they traded one battlefield for another, and Irelia is right in the middle of it, trying to hold it all together.
Which takes us to the final part of her story. The challenges she faces as a leader in a world that's anything but peaceful. But before we get there, I think we should take a moment to think about what we've learned so far. This isn't just about battles and magic, is it? It's about how conflict shapes us, forces us to face who we are, what we're willing to fight for.
It's a reminder that even the most graceful dancer can become a warrior when pushed to the edge. And that sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't made with fire, but with heart.
Okay, so we've seen Irelia go from dancer to warrior, lead Ionia to victory. But looking at what happens after, it's clear that the toughest battle might be the one for peace. Winning a war is one thing.
Yeah.
But rebuilding a broken nation, bringing people back together after all that, that's a whole other challenge.
One thing that really stands out in the sources is that even though Ionia was invaded, they're not all united.
Yeah.
There's a lot of debate about what their future should be.
Yeah.
Some want to isolate themselves, rebuild their walls, both literally and figuratively. Makes sense, you know.
Oh, totally. After all that trauma, wanting to protect themselves from the outside world.
Exactly. But then you have others saying Ionia needs to be stronger, more assertive.
Yeah.
That if they don't stand up for themselves, someone else will just come and try to take advantage again. It's like they've gone to the opposite extreme, from pacifism to we need to be ready to fight.
And Irelia is right in the middle of all that tension.
Yeah.
She's been thrust into this leadership role, but the people she's leading are divided about which way to go. It's not just about rebuilding buildings and stuff. It's about rebuilding trust, finding common ground after all the loss and pain.
It's a lot to handle.
It really is. I can't imagine being in her shoes. This young woman who just wanted to dance, now she has to mediate between these groups, each with their own valid points. Does she even have her own opinion on all this, or is she just trying to keep everything from falling apart?
The sources are kind of vague about that, which is interesting.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
It suggests that she's learning as she goes. She's not this perfect, all-knowing leader. She's figuring things out along with everyone else.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's this scene where a village elder actually challenges her, accuses her of becoming more like Noxus, all about war and power.
Oh, wow.
And her response is uncertain. She admits she doesn't have all the answers, but she's trying to find that balance,
Yeah.
a way to protect Ionia without losing what makes them who they are.
That's a really human response.
It is.
To admit you don't know everything, especially when you're in a position of power. It makes her seem more relatable, more real, but it also makes you wonder, is that enough? Can you really lead if you're always second-guessing yourself?
That's the challenge of leadership, isn't it? Especially after a war when things are so complex, there's no easy answers, no clear right or wrong. And it seems like Irelia makes mistakes, she stumbles, but she keeps learning, keeps trying to find that middle ground.
Which makes me think about the whole hero's journey thing. We tend to focus on the big battles, the victories, but what about what comes after? The struggle to rebuild, to come to terms with the past, to find your place in a world that's completely different. That's where real growth happens, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Irelia's story challenges us to look beyond the surface, to see the complexity of leadership,
Yeah.
the long road to healing after a conflict. It's not a fairy tale ending, it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
Full of doubt and struggle, but also moments of hope, of connection, of finding strength in unexpected ways.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this feeling of, well, a respect for Irelia. Not because she's perfect, not because she knows it all, but because she keeps going. She keeps pushing forward, even when it's hard, even when she's not sure where she's going. And that's something we can all learn from, right? That resilience, that willingness to keep learning and growing, that's what really makes us strong, individually and as a community.
It's a powerful message. And it reminds us that the stories we tell about heroes and villains, about winning and losing, they're never that straightforward. There's always more to it.
Right.
Layers of nuance of human experience that make us look closer, question what we believe, accept the messiness of it all. Because it's in that messiness, in those gray areas, that we find the real truths, the ones that stick with us long after the fighting's over.
And with that, I think we'll leave our listeners to think about all of this, because ultimately, Irelia's story is just the beginning. It's a spark to ignite your own curiosity, your own exploration of Ionia, of Runeterra, of what it means to lead, of the strength of the human spirit. What will you take away from her journey? What questions will you carry with you as you dive deeper into this world and into your own?